Hello, and welcome to another Half Pint session. Normally in these videos, I'm interviewing authors about Inklings-related books, but not today. Today, I'm speaking to a pair of nefarious writers. Today, I'm joined by Chuck Konzelman and Cary Solomon, and they are the writers and directors of a movie which released just a few weeks ago, Nefarious. Chuck and Cary, welcome to Pints with Jack.
Thank
you. Thank you for having us.
I forgot my pint, though.
We thought you were going to provide that for us.
There you go.
It's in the mail. Now, my wife and I, we watched the movie this past week, and we thought it was incredible. It was rather intense. We actually took a break about halfway through and sort of had a walk around in the garden just to cool off, because the genre for this is thriller, possibly, or maybe horror, but I think thriller is better, and it certainly thrilled. And one of the things that my wife commented on, she said that she really liked the way it was the script that drew you in and gave you the feeling of intensity, and it wasn't just relying upon spooky music or horror music to tell the audience how they should be feeling. But no, we really liked it. Cast was amazing. Jordan Belfi, he was Dr. James Martin, Sean Patrick Flannery, who played Nefarious and Edward, and Tom Omer, he played Warden Moss, and he is, when I close my eyes and think of a prison warden, it's that guy. Just perfect casting on that. But the movie so far seems to be getting an awful lot of praise. A bunch of exorcists have said that they think it's probably one of the most accurate demonic possession movies that they've ever seen. And I've got to say, after watching it myself, I would definitely say it's been weighed, measured, and found very engaging. And people will have to watch the movie to understand what I'm doing there. But we'll be talking about the movie in a moment. But before we get into that, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourselves, your personal and professional backgrounds?
Sure. We've known each other our whole life. My mom and dad, unfortunately, got divorced when I was a boy. Very young, and my mom took me out to New Jersey because I was in Brooklyn, New York. She took me out to Jersey, and Chuck was the boy next door, and we became best buddies out of boredom. He's been following me around ever since.
The way I explain the length of our friendship is that when we first met, I had so much hair that barbers literally had to thin it before they could cut it. That was not recently.
We see how that worked out.
Yeah.
But best man at my wedding, best friend, godfather to my son, and for whatever reason, we had a charism to work together, and, been in multiple businesses together, known each other forever and ever and ever. And it's what we do. We decided after building another business on the East Coast of America, that one day, and it was a God thing, we never even thought about going to the movie business. And one day I just looked at him and I said, "You want to go to Hollywood?" And we had built this business.
It's not something sensible people do in New Jersey.
Right. And
No.
he said, "Sure."
Or anywhere.
He said, "Sure, yeah, let's do it." And we got in our Jeep and we went cross country, and that was the beginning about 30 years ago of making movies. It was crazy. It was insane. But that's pretty much our whole story.
Yeah, we worked for the studios for a while. We started off doing cheesy actioners, and then we started working for the studios doing some of their projects, and then the Lord tapped us on the shoulder and asked us to go to work for him. But he was not very subtle about it. He was pretty direct, and we're like, okay, we'll try this.
But it's been an amazing journey, amazing process, and when you can make a movie like a Nefarious, it's gripping. It's you're always fascinated when you see reactions from people when it comes to your work. And so all praise to God. It's been amazing.
Well, let's talk about the movie then. In a nutshell, how would you describe it?
Well, the storyline is there's a condemned serial killer, played by Sean Patrick Flannery, Boondock Saints guy. He's on death row. It's the date scheduled for his execution, but his previous prison psychiatrist has just committed suicide. And it calls all of that psychiatrist's findings, his recent findings, into question. Well, the problem is the state cannot execute you unless you're sane. So they call in another psychiatrist for an 11th hour evaluation of the condemned's sanity. And on the way into the prison, this new psychiatrist who's never met the prisoner before is warned by the warden. This guy knows what's coming. He's trying to get out of it. He's going to try to convince you he's crazy. Don't fall for any of it. If you allow him to, he'll twist your head around so badly you'll think you're the killer, not him. The psychiatrist dismisses that. He walks in, he meets the condemned, and is kind of stood up because the condemned seems to know all sorts of things about him and his past and his personality that no one has any business knowing. And then the condemned keeps turning the tables on him. He says, I know you think I want to get out of here, but I don't. I want to be executed. I'm actually a demon in full possession of this human being, and it's time for him to be executed. It's time for him to go to hell. And then they have a discussion. And then there are three possibilities for the audience. One is that this is a brilliant faker who's faking being a demon faking insanity to keep from being executed. Another is it's a brilliant prisoner who is deluded and actually is insane. And the third is that he actually is possessed by a demonic entity. And the audience is invited into this discussion between these two individuals to try to figure out what does and does not, what the truth is.
And obviously the reason we're on is that the log line, the pitch line that we use to everyone is it's C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters meets Silence of the Lambs.
That's right.
And so that is the best analysis I could say. You know, so we love C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, like a lot of people.
Well, the movie wouldn't have been possible, quite frankly, without the Screwtape Letters. I mean,
it was an inspiration for us.
You know, the idea of Steve Dace, who's a conservative commentator, who wrote a book that inspired this, but he came up with the character of Lord Nefarious and the demonic character. Spoiler alert: yes, he is in fact a demon in full possession of a human being. That's why the movie tends to be kind of interesting, because we hear his thoughts on things. So Steve was inspired by the Screwtape Letters and wanted to do something. And then when we got hold of it, without even knowing, I don't think we even knew that, we said, well, this should be the Screwtape Letters meets Silence of the Lambs. And if we're going to, as long as we've got CS all over this conversation, we'll borrow from one of his comments where he said basically words to the effect of, we don't need more Christian books, we need more books by Christians. In this case, we don't need more Christian movies, we need more movies by Christians. And so that's what this whole thing is. And again, borrowing from Lewis and the idea of when you had Screwtape, the idea of being able to climb inside the head of a lieutenant of hell is much easier and much safer than trying to climb inside the head of the Prince of Darkness himself.
But this was percolating for years with us, because the idea of the comedic way that CS did it, we always thought, what would that be? But
humorous. Yeah, it doesn't go to broad comedy, but it's obviously the wit in the original is obviously it's half the fun of reading.
But we kind of said, from a story point of view, what if you really had an interview with the devil,
with a real demon,
What would that look like?
And the irony is that in our post-Christian culture, we are both here in the States and in Europe, but even more so in Europe. The audiences by and large would dismiss any commentary from a priest or a cleric of any sort. Whereas if a demon were to preach the gospel, his version of the gospel, believing every word of Scripture but despising it at the same time, if he were to preach the gospel from the other side of the mirror, as it were, that could be really interesting.
So it's interesting to us, and that's how the movie, the idea was always there. It was just a matter of finding the right vehicle.
Yep.
As you were enumerating the different options for the character, it actually made me think of Lewis's trilemma, but it's a demonic version. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or Lucifer. The illustration still works.
I never thought of that one. That's great. Yes, that's what we've got.
Well, Lewis came up with the idea of the Screwtape Letters when he was sitting in church and being very bored by a very boring sermon. What was the inspiration and origin of the entire Nefarious idea and the movie? You said that you wanted to do something like this. What was actually the origin?
I think we'd always toyed with the idea of maybe getting the rights to the original, but there was always the question of how can you film it? It seems it's brilliant, but almost unfilmable. And then Steve Dace, the commentator, wrote a book that was really interesting and even less filmable. In his version, from his demon, Lord Nefarious, it's the equivalent of the Screwtape Letters if Wormwood, and I'm sorry, am I screwing? If the nephew doesn't exist. So it's only the demon delivering a series of sermons to the reader, and there's no second character. And it's really just the demon commenting and gloating on how he's destroyed Western civilization. And we're like, Steve, the book is really interesting, but it's completely unfilmable. One of the first problems you're going to need is a second character. He's going to need someone to talk to.
And that's what we did. We said to him, look, if we're going to make this a movie, you're going to have to give us the liberty. And we don't really do projects without being in control creatively. So we said to him, look, you're going to have to trust us. But we'll run the story by you and make sure it honors the book. But the bottom line is that the book it's got no other characters. It's all it's all a conversation. It's just a rant, really. It's more like a sermon. So he said, dude, go for it.
Steve now considers this a prequel to the book he actually wrote. And we're fine with that. That's good.
So, and that's what happened. And then from there, we did what we do. You sit in the room and you knock it out. And or you drive or you go down to the beach. But wherever you get your inspiration from. And it took us about a year to write the script. So
in an inordinately
right.
long period of time for 90-minute movies.
We didn't really want to do the project in the beginning. We kind of tried to avoid it. But we kept getting guided back by the spirit. Like we'd wander that way or this way and want to do a Western or something. But the Lord he'd bring us right back onto this. So eventually we just gave up because he was persistent, and we did it.
Yeah, and in 3 decades of writing, there's only twice that we've ever felt so oppressed that we had to actually take a break for a period of weeks.
This was one of those.
This was one of the two. The other one was something set in a concentration camp. So I mean, it was just it was heavy at a certain point in time, and we were writing this during the depths of the COVID lockdown, and we just said, you know what, excuse me. We're going to go work on a comedy for a few weeks and then we'll come back.
Right. I was going to say, being locked in your own houses, it was the best thing that you could do to make yourself get into the mind of a prisoner, I suppose.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now,
it was good.
Your response to the writing is interesting because Lewis actually says something very similar. In the longer preface to the Screwtape Letters, he says that while nothing came more easily to him, he enjoyed nothing less. It was just the worst because he had to put himself into the demonic point of view. Nothing but, dirt and grit and sweat and horribleness. You said that that you guys kind of suffered through this as well. How did you respond to that other than just taking a break?
We just soldier on with whatever we're doing. But what was interesting was we had the flip side of Lewis's experience. That's because he's a better writer. We just had so much that didn't work. There were so many things that we tried that just didn't work. What we did find through the process was that any subject matter that didn't deal directly what was going on between these two individuals at this point in time almost invariably didn't work.
We played with going into flashbacks or jump outs, in other words, where you go to another scene because they're talking about it or whatever. Didn't work. We had it had to be between the two of them in that room, or it just didn't work.
Even ranging further on the discussions. I mean, there's a couple of times when they talk about bigger things, they talk about creation from the demonic perspective and all that, but it's only because they're having an argument at that moment about how this stuff works. It's not just to go have a discussion on it. It's just that basically, ironically, the demon considers the psychiatrist something of a moron for not believing that there is a God. When the psychiatrist questions, the existence, the psychiatrist finds himself surprised to hear a demon talking about a creator God, even though he never says the word God. And the demon's response is words to the effect of, unfortunately for both of us, he exists.
But we never also, by the way, we never stepped into the demonic or the satanic, which would have been very, it's what everybody does, and I think it's to their peril. We prayed every day, almost every scene, we prayed a lot, asked for protection. We never wanted to go to the demonic. First of all, it's cheap writing. Somebody walks up the wall or spins their head, whatever. I mean, it's been done 70,000 times. And quite honestly, we do believe in good and evil. So I'm not using evil to further my purpose. We refused to do it. Thank goodness we were able to do it. What we did is we theologically did our research, on every subject and how it works. And like you were saying earlier in the show, Father Carlos Martins, who's the most popular exorcist in America, he has a show called The Exorcist Files. He basically said this, and he's become our champion for this movie. He basically said this movie is the most accurate description, the best movie on possession, on exorcism that has ever been made. And there's a reason for that. It's not spectacle. It's truth. It shows you good and bad, God and the devil. Exactly how the devil works. He outsmarts you. He forces you into a corner. He's smarter than we are. And so he works it that way.
What it is if we were to compare it again to the Screwtape Letters was surprising to its initial audience in how the demons were working in the everyday affairs of life, and nothing was particularly showy. And this movie's about a victim who's much further down the slippery slope and is into, he's been a serial killer. But it's the same malice and the same evil behind that descent. And so that's the operating system for the film.
I suppose the most showy part of the entire movie, I'm not giving anything away because it's in the trailer, the doctor has demanded proof that this man is a demon, and at that moment the light bulb explodes and he goes, it's probably a coincidence. Firstly, absolutely, that was hilarious. That was very Screwtape-esque. But really, that's as much as it gets in terms of the traditional exorcist movie kind of manifestations that you see. And as you say, a lot of it was about the conversation itself. So I was curious, are there any particular lines in the movie or scenes in particular which you're particularly proud of and that you enjoy? Because I have a few of mine afterwards that I'll tell you about.
There's one that's fun. I like one that's kind of fun where the demon has actually gotten the psychiatrist's goat to the point where he leaves the table where they've been interviewing. It's almost like he can't stand it anymore, and then he returns, and the demon says to him, ready for round two, and the psychiatrist says, I didn't realize this was a fight. The demon says, that's why you're losing.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of great lines in there. All hell rejoices.
Ooh,
that came out of, that was the Holy Spirit. That was so powerful. It bothered us when we.
It bothers me when I watch it now.
When we came up with it,
it's meant to be very uncomfortable.
What's a little malice between friends? A play on that. Yeah. I think probably the greatest line in the movie was when the demon reflects, and you can see he's almost got a faraway stare and says, "The cross was our greatest mistake." In other words, I thought that was incredibly powerful.
Sometimes the demon is reversing scripture, and what's ironic in the piece is that the psychiatrist has no awareness of the context. So at one point, the psychiatrist is echoing Pilate with Jesus. He says, "Do you realize I have the power to save you or condemn you?" And the demon responds, "What I realize is you would have no power over me whatsoever had it not already been given to you from below." And the demon is completely aware of what they're acting out, and the psychiatrist has no idea of what they're acting out.
I think there were probably several dozen lines in the movie that we fell for, and I've probably out of all of our movies, we've never had this much chunks of gold.
Yeah, there's some, and what's really ironic is there's a ton of scripture in here, either delivered directly or inverted from the demonic perspective, always to serve the demonic agenda, and yet it's almost invisible in a strange way, because it's delivered with such malice behind it, such bile.
And I think that the great lines are also surrounded by other lines and sequences and scenes, like the scene where he's talking about sex trafficking, and I mean, I thought it was incredibly compelling, and it's exactly what's going on in the world. I mean, the theological discourses are powerful. I believe that this movie was anointed. Now, I don't know if you're believers or religious, if your followers are religious or not. We are. So it came from a place where we were awestruck many, many times, surprised, because that we didn't feel like we came up with a lot of the lines. That was all the Lord. But the power of certain lines and sequences in this movie, we've never seen this reaction. Look, we've done God's Not Dead, we did Unplanned, we've done a lot of movies that really had an effect. There is nothing like this that has ever happened. I'm telling you, in America, we have people that are going to this movie 7 days in a row and bringing different people each day.
People find themselves that they can't stop thinking about the film the next day and for a number of days later. It does not let them go.
The reactions were off the hook, and I believe it's because it's anointed.
Yeah, I've never been part of anything that had that effect.
Well, you'd also got to remember, we bring the devil out of the darkness into the light. That's the interesting thing. And then truth is evident. We watch good versus evil, and the devil is bragging. He's literally bragging. You're done. We finished you. It's over. And so he's bragging on how he does everything. And to your viewer, very, very, very interesting, because they suddenly realize, this is kind of like, this could be happening in the real world, which it is. And so, I mean, I think it's sobering for a lot of people.
One of my favorite lines, you got most of them. One that you didn't mention was where he says, "I know more about theology than any human being that ever existed." And that connects with a passage that I thought of a little moment earlier when you were talking about the demons' belief in God. In the epistle to James, James says, "The demons believe and they shudder."
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They before the holy and terrible name of Jesus, they tremble.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And one of the scenes that tickled me, it took me a moment to realize what was happening, but you have a priest come into the conversation fairly briefly, and you see the prisoner get very agitated when he sees him coming towards him, and his hair starts forming into very subtle little horns. And then as soon as he realizes that this guy isn't a threat, he chills out completely. Connecting it with another Lewis book, it made me think of the Episcopal ghost in The Great Divorce. This clergyman, this high-ranking clergyman, who is ultimately choosing to go back to hell because he basically doesn't believe in, well, certainly not heaven and hell, even when he's been standing in both.
It's crazy. I'm very impressed. We're very impressed that you caught the hair. Very few people caught it. But the horns were a last-minute thing that Sean did, and he designed his hair.
He didn't bother mentioning that ahead of time, by the way. Part of the fun of working with actors. He's like, "Did you see it?" We're like, "Yeah, we saw it."
And so what happened was, but what we thought was very interesting, the priest comes in the room. He's originally scared, so his horns go up almost like a defense mechanism. But when he sits at the table and realizes the priest he's not even he's a poser.
He may have been ordained, but he does not believe in his own authority. And by ceding that authority, then the demon's you're no threat to me.
The horns come down. So it was very interesting, and I thought Sean did an amazing job with the movie. As did Jordan and Tom. Yeah. We cast well. I mean, those three guys.
The spirit was very good to us on that. Tom, when you were talking about him, that he feels like he's a warden. Yeah, he was a police officer and a formerly a Marine in an assault company. So he's just like one of those guys.
That makes sense.
And by the way, I'll give you a compliment. Okay, the exact words you said are the exact words I said to Chuck. I said, "I hope this guy can act, but I'll tell you one thing. This guy looks like a warden. We're going to hire him. We'll just tell him to be quiet and just stand there.
Looks like we got on the phone to Central Casting, said send us a warden, and this is who they sent us.
And I stand by that. I mean, he was great.
Yeah,
he looked the part, and he did a great job.
He's such a nice guy too. He really is.
Mm. Well, could you tell us a little bit about the process of filming? Because I heard that there were a lot of challenges. I heard that Jordan had a child on his first day, as well as all kinds of things going wrong. And would you mind just telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you this isn't the diabolic or demonic. This is just the routine craziness of filmmaking. So on the first morning of filming, we're filming outside a real working prison. We will soon be filming inside the wire in a real working prison. And we have extras who are theoretically staging a riot, a protest. And our filming coincided with the annual board of the prison directors meeting, and they thought they had an actual working riot outside the prison. So they shut everything down for 90 minutes. That was fun. And then literally before the first shot was called, we were only delaying because the sun wasn't high enough yet to start shooting. Jordan was in his trailer, and he got the phone call from his wife, and his first child, his son, had just been born.
And he came over to us, and we literally were about to say, okay, action. And he said, guys, I got to tell you something. And we're like, okay, I figure it's a last-minute jitter or something like that. And he says, I just had a son. And we were totally excited for him, but on the inside, we were out of our minds because all of a sudden, as a human being, what am I going to say to him? Okay, that's great, go to work, which is what a lot of people would do, okay? But we would have let him go home if he wanted to. And I would have just have to recast the movie. It would have maybe killed the movie or whatever. But Jordan had spoken to his wife ahead of time, knowing it was a possibility. And they basically both agreed that it was an important piece of work and that he wanted to do it and he was going to do it. And she thought it was good for him to do it. And we shared this amazing moment that will live for us and for him, I'm sure, for the rest of... it is one of the high points of our career.
Now that's the good and the fun stuff.
Now it goes the other way.
Now onto the diabolical oppression stuff. So before we're getting ready to start shooting the film the first time, we're less than 10 days out. We have a dinner, a barbecue, last thing, which I refer to as the dinner of death. And 9 of our 15 key personnel of the film get COVID. So our production designer, I think, brought it in, and so Cary spent 8 days in the hospital. I wish they could have died. Everybody, so the production shuts down, doesn't get started.
It costs us $600,000 to keep the set.
Yeah, our hero set, which has been built in a basketball arena, we have to keep up now. So we come back again, and pre-production is going swimmingly. We're like, okay, maybe the Lord is really, maybe we got a hedge of protection here. Well, it felt that way for a very short period of time. And
very short
period of time. So we start filming. And a couple days into it, the national headquarters of IATSE, which is the most powerful union, orders a strike with no strike vote and no grounds.
Totally inappropriate, totally immoral, no reason.
Our on-set exorcism-trained priest has an emergency appendectomy a couple hours after he says Mass for us. His appendix bursts during removal, and the surgeon tells him if you were here an hour later, you wouldn't be alive.
8 car crashes we'll make it fast. 8 car crashes in 11 days. The cars are totaled. No one's hurt. So what are we watching? The devil tries to stop the movie. The Lord protects. So he wipes out the cars, but the Lord protects the people. And throughout all of shooting, by the way, not a scratch on one person, but things like this. 2 days ago, our marketing guy pulls off to the side of the road, gets out of his car, walks towards his house. Literally, he's 5 feet away from the car. Just then, another car comes off the highway and destroys his car. 2 days before that, our producer is taking his baby boy, putting him in his car seat in the back seat of his car. But the kid's leg gets stuck, so he reaches in to undo the leg from the strap, and a car hits the door that's leaning against him, wipes the door out. He's left standing there with the baby is fine, the other kid is fine, his wife is fine. He's just standing there with a destroyed car.
Actually, I'm not sure his wife is so fine. She was a little bit taken by what could have just happened. But yes.
I bet.
Okay, we're doing a press junket in our premiere for our premiere. You have all the press and you have all the actors, and it's 2 day long thing. And when we're doing it, so what happens is we're shooting, and these really weird voices, gonna sound crazy, and noises are coming out of a couch, and we're like, "Who's doing that?" Then the light starts to flicker on and off. Then the sound mixer dies. Then the two cameras...
The equipment, not a person.
Yeah, then the two cameras get corrupted, and they die. We lose all the footage. Everything's going freaky crazy. So we call up Father Carlos Martins, the guy I was telling you about, who's the most renowned exorcist in the United States. We say, we think we got a problem
He was
here.
a guest at our premiere, so we just got him to come back upstairs.
So he comes upstairs and he says, I know exactly what this is. He takes out his holy water in his book, and he starts doing a legitimate exorcism in the room.
A rite of exorcism for place.
With his back to the window.
In Latin, yeah.
We're 5 stores up. There's nothing behind him. All of a sudden, behind his right ear, a female voice demonically chanting, trying to distract him. But he goes through the whole
It's
prayer.
in a place where no human being is or can be. There's
Right.
no room there.
There's, he proceeds. She wants to distract the prayer. He, obviously being a pro, continues the prayer. What was the line he got to?
He gets to the part of the exorcism where he's reciting, "Bow now before the holy and terrible name of Jesus."
In Latin. The minute he gets there, the voice disappears. The voices in the couches flee. The lights stop flickering, and everything starts working.
Some other demonic manifestation at the premiere. We do another exorcism of place, which we'd planned on. On the way home, our booking agent, the guy who's arranging our theaters, this is the most intense part of his work. He's on a short flight from Dallas to Phoenix. His eardrum perforates. But my favorite of all. So we're in our building doing our marketing effort. We've got our people working there. There are only 2 things going on in this building: post-production for The Chosen, the biblical series, and our marketing effort. Only one building in Burbank during the torrential rains gets the entire roof ripped off.
The whole roof.
The whole roof. I'm not talking about...
Not a little piece. The roof of the building.
Now, naturally, this happens, as best we can tell, about 2 or 3 in the morning on a Saturday morning. So no one knows anything about this.
And a building full of electronics. Now, remember, everywhere there's electronics, you're in post.
Computers, editing equipment, all that. So literally, the 2-story building gets turned into an indoor water park. The carpets have to get torn up. Every wall has to get ripped out. The building is taken down to sticks.
Every cell phone, every phone call, every email, every building doesn't work. We go into a building. We went to a building called Deluxe, which is where you do your final quality control.
This is a $100 million plus complex. Yeah,
we're about to show the movie. The building loses electricity. We go to the supply goods store, it's called Staples in America. It's like Staples. It's an office supply store, big store. We go into the store. It's an Office Depot. It's called. Electricity goes out. We can't buy anything. Everywhere we go, total attack on every single thing.
Communications and digital equipment. We're not the only... the composer, when he was working on The Passion of the Christ, was so frustrated by his electronic difficulties that he actually... not very smart, in my opinion. In the middle of the night, he went out into the parking lot of where he was working and challenged the devil to a fist fight. The devil did not show up, and I think that's really to his advantage that he did.
But, I mean, the thing is that when you're going to, take on the devil, he fights back.
Yeah.
But we were protected.
Yeah.
And still are protected, and praise be to God for that. But the amount of... We had to make this movie 3 times. Literally. Because the bottom line is, he keeps messing everything up.
Yeah.
I mean... We had a crew of, let's say, 75 or 80 people. We went down to 15, 20 people because of a strike.
It is impossible.
It's impossible to make a movie with 15 people.
This movie works. We had no script supervisor, the person who keeps track of all the continuities.
Okay, we had our craft services girl, which is a girl that feeds coffee and...
It's who lays out the snacks and potato chips between meals.
She was our costume designer because the costume designer was gone. Okay, and then you look at it, when you look at it in the movie, it looks, feels, smells, and is a real movie.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Yeah.
So the hand of God was on the movie and us.
We were really blessed.
We were blessed. All praise to the Lord. I will tell you, it's been an experience. And by the way,
Sounds it.
if you don't, I would give this invitation to any of your listeners. If any of them don't believe in the devil, come down to our next movie and stay on set for a week. You'll find out.
I like the challenge. Actually, that would make a really fun documentary. Have a bunch of skeptics watching you guys film something. I think that would be hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
Well, speaking of future productions, Lewis, he was begged to write a sequel to the Screwtape Letters, and he resisted for some time, but he eventually came out with Screwtape Proposes a Toast. And there are other Steve Juice novels to adapt. So is it possible that Nefarious might have a sequel?
I think if the Lord calls us to do it, we will. I think it could have a prequel, a sequel, and a TV show. A prequel, the cool thing about Nefarious as a character, I can put him in any time in history because demons don't have a lifespan. So, like, for example, I could have him in the French Revolution. I could put him back in Rome. I could put him in doing his machinations through history. I could put him in Jerusalem for the crucifixion. So there's a lot of stuff that I could do for a prequel. For a sequel, there's also a lot of stuff I could do in contemporary time. You know, we could do how did Nefarious get arrested? You know, what's the story about him and the cop? Or we could do the next part of what happens with James, the psychiatrist. And as far as the TV show, I think it would be a great TV show because what we would do is have Nefarious confounding and doing and being very nefarious from week to week.
For lack of a better term, touched by a demon, yeah.
And then we'd have the doctor trying to stop that. And, you know, and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot we can do. Whether or not we're called to do it, I don't know. We'll see. You know, it's up to him.
I'm looking forward to, as much as I've loved the project, I'm looking to 2 or 3 weeks at some point without Lord Nefarious in my life. He's been dominating the last several years of my life, and I'm looking to take a vacation for a couple weeks.
I like it. Chuck, Cary, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
As the landlord rings the bell for final drinks, can you tell people where they can find out more about you and the movie?
You can just look us up on the internet, Cary Solomon, Chuck Konzelman, or on IMDb.
They can go to whoisnefarious.com for the movie. Some information about the movie.
And the movie, you're in England, I presume, from the accent, right? Don't tell me you're right here in Los Angeles.
The accent is English. I actually used to live in San Diego, but I moved to Wisconsin 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. So you're not... I thought you were in England. Okay. My mom is British. She grew up in England, in Ipswich.
Oh, there's hope for you yet.
You know, so yeah, there you go. And my grandfather played professional football for Crystal Palace and Ipswich.
Oh, wow.
But anywhere movies are seen, sold, or will be online and so on. It's like every other movie. You can go down to the movie theater or you can go see it. You know, you can wait. I'd prefer you to go to the movie theater because the more people that do, the longer we stay in the movie
will allow
theaters.
us to stay there, yeah.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, listeners, viewers, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. And please join us next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.